Hey everybody, I'm here hanging out among the hydrangeas, and I'm very lucky that we have these beautiful green leaves to look at because about 10 days ago we had some very severe weather. So we had 3 days of frost, which that happens at the end of May in Michigan. We are always at risk for frost at that time, but temperatures got all the way down to 27. So we didn't just have frost, we had a freeze, and it was nerve-wracking because when all your shrubs and your trees have leafed out already and you get a really frigid temperature like that, it can do a huge amount of damage to it. So I want to just take a moment to show you what that damage looks like and how we kind of tried to compensate for it, or how we mitigated that problem at the time. So when we knew it was getting cold, and normally the coldest time is right before sunrise, so usually between 5 and 6 a.m. is when we got the coldest. That's when we had that 27 degrees. That said, my dad was out probably at 3 in the morning, and what we actually do when we know it's going to get that cold is we take the hose with water and we spray all the plants. And you probably have seen this in like the Florida citrus crops. They do this as well. Somehow, it seems counterintuitive to actually encourage ice on those plants, but somehow the thermodynamics of it actually insulate the plant and protect the leaves and protects the cell structure of the leaves. And that's what's the most important thing. You don't want the cell structure to freeze. So the freezing on the outside somehow protects what's inside. I don't quite understand it, but it definitely works. So I'm going to show you exactly what kind of damage we did see and what that looks like, because you might be seeing it on some of your plants and trees. Fortunately, every single one of our plants are recovering from it. Now, some of them might be a little ugly for a little while, but that we can deal with that, because as long as they survive, we know that they're going to be beautiful just a little bit later on down the road. So the plants that were hardest hit were the macrophylla, or big leaf hydrangeas. Now this is the Let's Dance Ariba. It's actually a macrophylla serrata hybrid, but the leaves are very similar. They have those kind of thicker, more plump leaves, and those do get damaged pretty easily. So you can see the red on the leaf. That usually either means sun scorch, or in this case it was the frost, and you can see we lost a lot of the leaves on this. They froze and there's no coming back from it. And this is one of the reasons why macrophyllas are kind of risky in our area, because a lot of the macrophyllas, their first blooms are set in the fall. So these tips, could have had blooms. They probably did have what would become blossoms on them, and those get nipped. And so a lot of times a macrophylla, we don't have real good luck with the flowering on these because of that. Now, the good thing is varieties like this Let's Dance Ariba, it's very quick to send up new blooms or reset its blooms. So fortunately, this one is going to bloom this season very easily. That's not the case with all macrophyllas. So if you have a macrophylla, or maybe an oak leaf hydrangea or one of those varieties that just never flowers for you, it might be because it's getting nipped by frost. If you're in a cold climate and you get that late freeze, those buds can end up getting frozen, and then you don't get flowers for that season. But if you have a variety that can bloom on new wood as well as the old wood, it'll do really well. And you can see we got a lot of new kind of growth in there. So these are all going to be bouncing back and looking really great. It's just going to take a little while for the new growth to kind of hide some of this. We will go through and clean this up as well, but I kind of wanted to see how much damage there was before we spent any time cleaning it up. Now, one of the most interesting things is that the plants that we wintered over here in Posen, and they're on our schedule, how much better they fared compared to plants that we had gotten in from other places. So just about every single one that we wintered over doesn't show any sign of damage. So a couple of them might be have a little bit of purple on the leaves, but that's about the extent of the damage. Meanwhile, we have these other varieties. They came in from a grower in downstate Michigan, which is going to be probably 5 hours away south from us, and you can see the leaves definitely are they show signs of stress. They're a little bit discolored. They're kind of brownish red. They're still doing fine, and they're definitely going to recover. We're already seeing new growth coming out of this, but they are still flowering, but definitely don't have that nice green luster that we like to see. Meanwhile, if I move down here, this one here is one that came in from a grower in Ohio, and we only got a couple plants in from Ohio, but every single one of them, they were so much farther along and the leaves are so much more mature. They had a really hard time with the frost, and so you can see there's a lot of dead leaves, a lot of discoloration. This plant's going to be just fine. That's the great thing about both the paniculata variety and the arborescens, is that you can hack them back down just about any point, and they usually regrow very efficiently. So that's nice to see. Fortunately too, if you look underneath, the plants, or the leaves down at the bottom had hardly any damage. So we're very happy about that. We're going to clean these up as time permits, but they're going to be looking great in a little while. But they are, this does set them back, but it does tell me what a difference it makes when you have a plant like that we wintered over and it's on our schedule and it's used to our kind of cooler temperatures. These weren't quite as shocked as these other ones, because these plants that we had have been basically outside all winter. Some of the leaves end up with this almost like bronzing, almost like a frosted effect. That's just damage from the cold. And again, we could always trim these off, or with an arborescent variety like this, we can always just cut it right back down to, say, 4 inches or 6 inches or something like that, and it's just going to resprout. It's just going to delay the blooms a little bit, but right now we're trying to decide exactly. We might cut back half of them and leave half of them just so that we kind of stagger the blooms. But you can see they definitely have recovered, and the ones in the centers tended to be a little bit more protected than the ones on the outside. So we saw more damage kind of on the perimeter than we did on the inside. So that's another good thing, is that the plants kind of try to protect each other just naturally because of the way we had them situated. So we're lucky we had them at least this close together, because we don't usually want our plants touching this much, but it just kind of worked out that they were, but as we sell them, there'll be more and more room. So there are a couple of plants that about 5 days after the frost, we started seeing this kind of paling, or this whitening of the leaves. So they lost their green. And so I was nervous about that, but I found it doesn't seem to have affected the blooms at all. So a lot of these, the blooms are still developing. So we're still seeing, the flowers. So we're going to get flower on these mock orange, even though they were really nipped by the frost and they're showing signs of it, they're still doing just fine. So they've survived it. They're going to be really, hopefully fully recovered very quickly. They just look a little off right now. Meanwhile, we also saw the same thing on the Weigela. So you can see the exact same effect, that kind of loss of color in there. However, even with that loss of color and that little bit of bronzing on the leaves, they did start flowering this week. So they went from that freeze right into 90-degree temperatures, and they just said, hey, we're just going to go without it, or we're going to work with this and make it happen. So you can see some of the leaves turn, really lose their color. Others just kind of get that little bit of discoloration on it. But overall, things did pretty well. You can see the effect a little bit more on some of the different varieties, especially the dark leaf ones. But it's fascinating to see how each plant responds differently. Here's another one that kind of got nipped a little bit more. Now, fortunately, the trees made it through the cold snap pretty much with no problem at all. In fact, like this hawthorn is just starting to bloom, so that's looking really great. And then also didn't affect the fringe tree, and the fringe tree is always a fun one. I don't know if you've seen this one before. It has the most unusual flower. You can see when it blows in the wind, it really looks like a flapper's dress. It's got just really, it's just so unique. I really love the fringe tree. It's just unusual for our area, but hey, wasn't affected by that cold weather at all. So how it is we went from a deep freeze to these 90-degree days, I don't really know, but hey, that's how nature works. And now we're kind of dealing with some hazy skies. I think it's from the wildfires north of us, so you can see that's the sun back there. It's kind of eerie in here because we've been so bright and clear and warm and everything the past couple days. But anyway, hey, weather's just something we deal with in this business, but I just thought it was interesting to see how these different plants kind of were affected by those really cold, unseasonably cold temperatures. Again, we get frost this time of year, but a freeze like that, 27 degrees, that's pretty darn cold. So hey, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to you all very soon.